Greetings, adventurers, and welcome back to the Den of the Drake. Other dragons hoard gold while I hoard internet cringe. I get a lot of comments on my channel from people claiming that they are new to the world of RPGs, and are hesitant to actually play any because they're afraid they may encounter individuals like we see in the stories I read. For those of you who count themselves among this number, rest easy. I mean, sure, you might meet some weirdos, and I'm not saying that you're never gonna have an RPG horror story of your own. But the reason why RPG horror stories are so popular is because they're rare. Don't believe me? I'll prove it with math. r/RPG Horror Stories has a total of 222,000 members. Now that seems like a lot, sure, but according to Wizards of the Coast, D&D alone has over 50 million players, which means that only 0.4% of people have had an experience with D&D so bad that they felt that they needed to go online to post about it. With that logic, you might as well be afraid to leave your house because you think you're gonna get attacked by a great white shark. Of course, the math isn't perfect, but you get what I'm saying. The reason why people like these stories is because they're an anomaly that's fun to poke with a stick. And in this metaphor, me and my channel are the stick. However, every eon or so, the stars and planets will align, and we'll get the worst that the RPG hobby has to offer. The story I have for you today stars a player as they mount a desperate attempt to escape when they discover that their entire party and DM are degenerate that guys. Now, without any further delay, let's go ahead and dive right into the horrifying world of r/RPG horror stories. Enjoy. This week's story comes from user The Chandraraj and is titled The Party from Hell. This happened to me nearly 10 years ago, so some in-game story details may be a little foggy. Here's hoping that this story can entertain, if not educate a little. Names are changed, etc., etc. Now, I don't write things too graphically, but there is some mention of child abuse, unfortunately. Cast: me, myself, playing a halfling fighter. At the time, the only girl for most of the run. Was also pretty new to D&D, but not role-playing, and was happy to find a group willing to take me in at my local community college. London, an elf ranger. Pleasant dude, but seemed like he was allergic to bathing. He had a stench that could peel the paint off a tank in space. Brony, elf paladin. A big guy who liked to draw, especially MLP, which was the style at the time. Notorious for going on long-ass tangents and drawing women with astronomically large tits. Mitch, human scion? 3.5 edition homebrew or something. Soft-spoken guy who always seemed to have his brain somewhere else. At the time, we called him a flake. Now, the proper term for it is simp. He had the books on a hard drive and would sometimes leave the game to help random girls move, leaving us without resources. Other times, he'd bring totally disinterested girls to play without any explanation of what this game was. Don't bring your new crushes to a long-running game, folks, especially if they've never played before. Bro-barian, half-orc barbarian, still my friend to this day. Just a guy who wanted to play D&D. A sweetheart, if not a little oblivious to how awful things got. Big Sexy, the DM. Big Sexy was, at first glance, a little different from how you would picture a cringe DM from hell. He was kind of an enigma with age. The way he spoke about himself and his life experiences made him sound like a man in his 40s, if not mid-30s. Apparently, according to him, he was either divorced or had a baby mama, and also daughters. He was also apparently in the Yakuza. But I have a really hard time believing that. He practiced hygiene and was, on first glance, well-spoken. The fedora was a red flag, but in his defense, he wore a fedora with a fitted vest, shirt, and pants. Like, it matched and didn't look like a colorblind fashion disaster. He looked super out of time, sure, but I chalked that up to him being kinda quirky. At first, it was a dream come true. A large group of nerds who I could share interests with, and finally try this game. Amazing! It started out fun and lighthearted. It was like a group of 12 plus nerds that would switch in and out. Never join a group of more than 5 to 6, that's just begging for overcrowding problems. Since I was new and we had such a huge party with all the roles filled, I decided to play a character dubbed Hilda Bender, a halfling fighter and gigolo. He was mostly there to be a comedic relief, a coward, a lech, and a party animal. After some disagreements between the DM and other players, and other issues I don't exactly remember, the DM decided to add a new element to the story that basically sent us back in time and to level 1, all with a shaved-down cast of around 5. The story was basically sort of rebooted, and became a more proper adventure that you'd expect, instead of just goofing around. There were dungeons to clear, towns to visit, goals, and so on. Another huge difference was made with my character. The DM had a terrible time remembering that Hilda was in fact a man. I mean, I'm not sure how. I even drew him and there was plenty of time to mentally establish that I was not playing a woman. So out of frustration, after the millionth she was tossed their way, I asked, "Do you just want me to play a woman?" "Yes, please." Here was the first red flag. After Hilda became Hilda, with the time change, that is where everything started to change. We started playing at my grandparents' place after the time change. They had a large basement, and I was living with them at the time, and they were happy to see me socializing. It was also more private than playing at the community college. So the guys started whipping out their phones and laptops way more often. Not the biggest offense in the world, I get it, I get distracted too. But they were looking up dating sites to rate the women. If they weren't judging potential dates, they were looking at porn. And just kinda sharing with each other. Look, we all have needs, but we're here to play a game. I'd rather not have the game be delayed because a bunch of nerds decided to roll the dice under the table. Most of my pleas went unyielded until the DM decided that it was time to play. And even then, the pictures were still up and very visible, just not being ogled like a cartoon. What the fuck? Dude, I already get pretty salty when people take out their phones at the table. But if someone at my D&D table takes out their phone and starts looking at... Okay, well, to be honest, I can't even be mad. Because they have to be some kind of legally deranged or just so much of a Sigma male that I can't even comprehend their motives. But regardless, it's up to you to let your party know if something is making you uncomfortable. My first instinct would just be to fucking leave because I'm kind of a spastic when it comes to that kind of stuff. But if you really wanted to stay at the table, which I don't know why you would, you gotta let them know whatever they're doing is making you uncomfortable. Because if they're already socially inept enough to start sharing hentai at the table, they sure as hell aren't gonna be aware enough to know that it makes you uncomfortable. You gotta shut that shit down early because it's definitely only gonna get worse. Food etiquette was not a thing. I try to be a good host when I have people over. I make sure they have something to eat, drink, are comfortable, etc., etc. So I would go up to the kitchen, cook a cheap pizza, bring it down, go back upstairs to get drinks, come back with drinks, and the pizza was gone. Okay, time to make another. Go all the way back upstairs, cook another, go back downstairs, and they descend like locusts. A lot of my memories playing with this group are accompanied by a growling stomach and a crumb-laden mess. They'd end up being halfway through combat too, leaving me out of the fray once it got to my turn. Big Sexy's attitude towards women started to really surface once we were out of the open of the college. Some of this started with things that he would allow the players to just kinda have. Lady NPCs were almost always sexy lamps to just be given to the players. London's Ranger couldn't go anywhere without his sexy, busty, obedient succubi girlfriend, wife, whatever. Apparently, she was a whole thing in the original game. He had won her over with something, and even in a damn time reset, she still felt bound to be with him, and vice versa. There was no arc about them remembering each other or falling back in love. Just kinda status quo to the rescue. Don't want to think too hard. Their love was legit, so her succubi ways didn't hurt him. Or the lawful good paladin played by Brony. Just heroic. Blessed by the one god who was all just a god of goodness. Oh, we'll get there, don't worry. He needed a girl too, so he got a 14-year-old slave healer. So I was just willing to let the stupid succubi thing go, but this is just goddamn gross. I argued until I was blue in the face how it was both disgusting to deal with as a player, as well as not lawful good. I yelled at a man who supposedly had daughters why a grown man having a child concubine was not good. His argument? Well, in medieval times, it was common for men to marry much younger, so it's lawful. This wasn't medieval England / France / anywhere on this earth. It was an entirely different world. This world's history does not have to apply to this fantasy game. Big Sexy, by having this blank slate and filling it with the notion that child slavery is not just a thing, but a thing that is legally and culturally smiled upon by the god of all that is good, has just basically said that this was okay. There was no cynicism, no sarcasm, just flat out, well, it's legally good because people accept it. I was brushed aside as being too sensitive and needing to understand history more. Hi there. It's me, your narrator, Drake. I hope you're all enjoying the story so far. Just thought now would be a good time to come forward with a simple public service announcement on behalf of the channel. Don't fucking do this. So often I see disgusting behavior like this being explained away by, duh, we're just being historically accurate. Motherfucker, it's the fantasy genre. Fantasy, as in not real. As a DM, I'll let you have your 14-year-old slave if you can point out where in the Bible it mentions owl bears. Even if you are trying to do some historically accurate game, nowhere does it say that you are required to commit atrocities that were normalized at the time. Sure, you can acknowledge that it existed, but when you start to glamorize it, that kind of attitude is the reason why extra credits can keep pumping out smooth-brained videos like this. No, you are not a medieval knight wooing an unsoiled virgin. You are a grown-ass man with revolting desires. You deserve to be kicked, both from the game and in the nuts. Fuck you and fuck your historical accuracy bullshit. I wish I had booted them out after this. I wish I had stopped playing. But I was still a kid, lacking life experience, and had never heard the adage of no D&D is better than bad D&D. Mitch needed a sexy lamp too. Heaven forbid there be a player without a love interest. At this point, I had volunteered to voice the lady NPCs for him. I enjoy doing voices, and it put a damper on every woman having a lilting Irish falsetto, so bonus points. Another bonus to me being given the keys to NPCs was being able to steer things away from just sexy woman of some sort flavor to be won over. Sometimes they would already be married, in a relationship, gay, or just plain not interested. That wasn't to say there wouldn't be some women who were interested. Mitch had his pick, and one of them was a barmaid. Feisty, stood up for herself, and didn't exactly let people make a fool of her. She expected a commitment, and someone she wouldn't have to mother. She wasn't exactly trying to marry up either. Her family ran a chain of bars that brought in quite a bit of coin. She was dubbed a nag by the party because she wanted him to at least drop by and assure her that he was safe. Now then, a bit of world building. The world we played in had one god, and that god was the god of everything except evil. There was a huge emphasis on how they were good, and they were basically the Christianity god. And like in Christianity, God had one son. Well, this is a first. This DM is literally about to use Jesus as a DMPC. I swear to God, this story is gonna make me stick a fork inside of an electrical socket. Introducing Alistair, the DMPC Paladin, because this game wasn't already on a very slippery slope. Despite our party being pretty damn competent at all things, with how liberally Big Sexy gave out levels, feats, and magic items and money, we needed the literal Son of God. Alistair had everything maxed, and then some. He was sought after by people far and wide for his wisdom. He could easily lift up the side of a house all by himself, and he was always just and right. He was nimble and smart and healthy and good-looking beyond compare. Men wanted to be him, women wanted to be with him, and I wanted to die. This guy got saddled with us because apparently our OP party wasn't safe by ourselves from bandits and monsters that we made easy work out of. Off he went with our party without even being asked. A cycle began that drained whatever joy out of combat. A big foe would appear, the party would get ready to fight, Alistair would charge into action and end it in one move. So he'd do everything and leave us with our thumbs up our asses. All of the people loved him, except Hilda, my character. Hilda had changed quite a bit since being reset. And instead of a lecherous coward, she had become a tough-as-nails scrapper. She loved a good fight, and being yanked around by this guy only to have him protect her from something she didn't need help with just enraged her. Above all of that, he was self-important, self-righteous, and would go on long dramatic speeches that would put her to sleep. That may have been some projecting on my part, I admit, but I don't think it was wholly out of character or wrong. We don't need you. If you're so strong, why don't we just save the world over here, and you go save the world somewhere else? A notion that was scoffed off by him. Feelings were made obviously clear by me and the tired glazed eyes of the players, but Alistair was here like a bad rash. Somewhere along the way, the group had to get something from the Amazons. The Amazons, who were clearly 100% evil because they were atheists and hated men. Okay. The Amazons got smote to hell, and we got 4 converted young Amazonian women. 4 more intended prizes for the guys. 4 more women for me to play. Now with character sheets. So I could have and should have said no more, or refused to play the NPCs outright. But I was intrigued at the concept of these women, and giving them personalities and giving them different arcs, and yeah, no, that was going to be ignored. I don't remember 3/4 of them, sorry, but there's one that sticks out in my mind. One of the Amazonians was basically adopted by Alistair's, taught Paragon, the gods, ways, and became a paladin herself. I played her as this battle-hardened woman, who was also curious about this new world that she was experiencing. That's when she and Broberian forged a genuine romance. It wasn't planned or anything. They had gotten stuck somewhere for basically a year. Her, Broberian, and some other people. But the two liked each other's battle styles and would spar, and then they would talk about their common goals in life. Broberian was a half-orc from a far-off land in search of wisdom to bring home someday. She also was in a state of wanting to learn all the new things and discover herself. It was a slow burn, but the two would help each other in combat. They would joke, spar, and explore the town together. Big Sexy didn't like that. Alistair didn't like that. Alistair all of a sudden got very paranoid about this half-orc that he had already spent lots of time with. And now that he was holding hands with his adult ward daughter with a greatsword. Alistair demanded to know his intentions and declared that he couldn't taint his girl like that. Gross. He went on, casting Detect Evil, Detect Alignment, Zone of Truth, all of these tests to declare him as evil. Why? He's a half-orc, and all orcs are evil. Now, on first glance, this could have been an interesting turn. The all-righteous paladin being a raging bigot? A crack in his morality? All better ideas with a better writer. This was just Big Sexy not being happy with the pretty Amazon girl making kissy faces with an orc. Broberian, a very shy dude in real life, after all of these accusations and tests, just shyly brought out his character sheet and pointed to his alignment. I'm chaotic good. Broberian, the character, was indeed very good. He didn't hurt people unless they started it. And while he didn't understand all the laws or even like them, he abided until something was genuinely off-putting or wrong. He went out of his way to help people with jobs and across town. And so, after all the tests and the magic, even saying he was good, he was still not good enough for his little girl. He forbade him from ever seeing the Amazon. The two didn't listen for a while, going behind his back because, consenting adults. Until Alistair basically banished her to some far-off mountain to hone her skills, throwing her out of the game until further notice. She bade goodbye to Broberian, saying that it wasn't goodbye, just until they met again. A goodbye that genuinely rang sad. Hilda was not excluded from the fun romance shenanigans. She was, as a character, a bruiser. She wasn't fancy or feminine. She had no interest in long-term romances, and the romance she was interested in was with women. In a world full of factory-made ladies, you think that this would be no problem for her. Ha ha ha! Nope. After a while, she started getting prophetic dreams. That was already weird considering that she was pretty anti-theist. But she would get dreams from Paragon, saying that she would be responsible for saving the halfling race. That in the future, halflings would be eradicated. That's a pretty big order, but Hilda is a heroic type, and has fought things 5 times as big as she is. She was up to the challenge. She wanted to prove herself to her hometown, where she was given an ultimatum years back to either lady up and marry a rich boy or join the army. She walked into the recruitment tent backwards, flipping her parents off. That was the big thing for her. The solution? You must marry Alistair.
Nope.
Wait, stop everything. OP, you are the token woman, yes? And you are being forced to play all these women that the party abuses, correct? And now you're being forced into a non-consensual relationship with the creepy enabling DM's DMPC character. Side note, if I had a nickel for every time I've read a story where a DM forced a female player to marry his DMPC, I would have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it's happened twice. Okay, look, I know it's super easy to say, why didn't you just leave? It's a lot more nuanced than that, and there's a lot of social bullshit, blah blah blah. But let's go ahead and review what we have going on here. We got a dude who refuses to shower and has a mind-controlled succubus lover, a neckbeard brony, don't worry bronies, your day is coming, who is really living up to this stereotype by taking an underage girl to be his personal pet, and a creepy sexist DM who enables the other players' gross behavior while simultaneously using his DM PC, who is also Jesus, to force your character into performing acts that you aren't comfortable doing. I'm just gonna outright say it, OP, you were their toy. Effectively, you were a living plaything for each of the men at this table. Usually, I'm able to pay some lip service and say that with enough communication, this game could have been saved. But to be perfectly honest, nothing could have saved this game. The insane amount of compounding factors and degenerate personalities basically made this group a toxic dumping ground that OP was trying to sterilize with a bottle of Purell and wishful thinking. I haven't read ahead through the entirety of this story yet, but I really hope that OP realizes just how damn naive she's being by hoping things get better, and leaves this group as quickly as she can. Hilda would do a lot of gross, awful things. She had been covered in blood, mud, drank out of a half-orc shoe, but she wouldn't do that. Hell, if it had been any other man, sure. A loveless, touchless marriage, as a last resort maybe. But Alistair? Oh, hell no. So being stubborn, she tried to find every way out of this. There had to be other solutions, other ways to protect the halfling race. She studied and researched, but the dreams persisted, insisting that she had to bear Alistair's child. Out of game, Big Sexy was also pursuing me, insisting they'd be such a good match for each other. She just needs to give him a chance. That so much was riding on this blah blah blah. And between the in and out of game experience, I cracked. Fine, so Hilda sadly married Alistair. Fine, keep it on paper, leave me alone. When the time comes, give me a turkey baster. But it's not allowed like that. They had to go on honeymoon. Having the DM take my character sheet away and not letting me play Hilda for a while. On the bright side, Alistair was also gone, but I just wanted to play my fighter. For a time, I played a child sorcerer, because here's hoping they wouldn't try to pin romance on a child. Eventually, I was given Hilda back. Big Sexy seemed satisfied, and took the hint, having Alistair take care of something far away. Meanwhile, giants were invading Hilda's hometown. Finally, time to prove herself. So the party went to her town, armed to the bits, and Hilda took charge. She made good use of her giant slayer feats and slashed at ankles. She kicked colossal ass and it was incredible. The day is saved, the people are saved. All is good. There was much rejoicing. The halfling people began to erect a statue in the middle of town. Of Alistair. What? But he wasn't even here, I protested. Big Sexy smiled.
They know, but he's such a figure of goodness that they associate this liberation with him. But don't worry, you'll always be known as his wife.
That was the defining moment where all joy had been sucked out. It was just so abundantly clear that my feelings weren't being taken into account. My character was just something that he wanted to fix and break under his ego. I was stuck with a group that left me hungry, frustrated, and miserable. However, if you're petty like me, there is a happy ending to this. Around this time, I met my now fiancé. He asked me on a date for Friday night, which was when we usually played D&D. I was pretty burned out, and man was this guy cute. So I said yes. I told Big Sexy on Monday I had plans Friday. so he would have to find somewhere else to play that week. We went on the date and had a great time. Next Monday rolls around and I ask Big Sexy how the game went.
Terrible! We had to play at the school. We didn't have anything to eat and we had to be quiet. Clearly, you don't care about the game at all. We don't want you around anymore. Consider yourself booted.
And just like that, I was out. According to Mitch, who I asked about the game afterwards, the game only lasted one session after getting rid of me. They all burned out and never spoke to each other again. Now, I never let any kind of this shit happen in my current games. My current group, including my fiancé Anne Brobarian, has been playing ever since, and we have been having a wonderful time. TLDR, party eats all the food, openly looks at porn during the game, DM allows child slavery under the banner of lawful good, DM bullies a player for playing an orc, puts in an all-powerful DMPC to be the star of the show and forces my lesbian character to marry him. End of story. It's incredibly fitting that this DM used what amounts to be Lord of the Rings Jesus as a DMPC, because if I were in this game, I would be rather cross with him. No, but seriously though, screw this guy. As I said before, this game was completely unsavable. The thick film of degeneracy completely soiled any good that might have been underneath, to the point where I can barely even recognize the game as D&D anymore. OP absolutely did the right thing by leaving the way she did, and I'm so happy that she got the chance to get a quality group together, so she can finally enjoy a real game of Dungeons and Dragons, without the threat of an arranged marriage or historical accuracy. Now before we go, let's take a look at this week's Gallery of the Drake. This week's fan art is done by Miss Drevis Girl, and depicts a player's POV of my DM's stare. So your bard is seducing the dragon, huh? How original. Fine, roll a persuasion check. Oh, would you look at that? Roll for initiative. Thank you again, Miss Drevis Girl, for submitting your art. If you want to see your artwork featured in Gallery of the Drake, be sure to send it to the email in my About section. Fan art is my favorite part of doing YouTube, and it means the world to me that I can create content that inspires artists like you to create artwork like this. With the story over and artwork displayed, we're gonna wrap up. If you enjoyed your time here, be sure to like the video and subscribe. And if you want to support the channel even further, Patreon and merchandise links are in the description. I would like to thank you all for listening, and I hope to see you next time in the Den of the Drake.